When it comes to your home, you need a team you can trust. At Loader Plumbing, Heating and Gas, we pride ourselves on delivering reliable professional service every time. Whether it's a leaky tap, a boiler that needs attention, or a full central heating installation, our experienced engineers have you covered, even for landlords' gas safety certificates. We're fully qualified, gas safe registered, and dedicated to keeping your home running smoothly and safely. And because we know problems don't always happen between 9 and 5, Loader Plumbing, Heating and Gas offers fast response times and friendly service whenever you need us. So if you want peace of mind, quality workmanship, and a local team that truly cares, choose Loader Plumbing, Heating and Gas. Visit loaderplumbingandheating.com and let's keep your home warm, safe, and worry-free. Link is in the description below.
So here I am with Ben Habib. Thank you, Ben, for your time today.
Thank you for having me on.
No, not a problem, not a problem. I think it's been a long time coming. We've had some back and forth over emails as well. Yeah. I think I was begging you for a job for a while.
Were you?
I was, yeah. No, I think it was last year. So we know that you were part of UKIP. We know that you were part of the
Brexit. I wasn't part of UKIP.
Were you not?
No.
Oh, Brexit Party then?
Brexit Party. That was my first foray into politics.
Okay, so from there you were then part of Reform?
I kind of Brexit Party sort of disbanded in January 2020, much to my disappointment, but it ceased to operate. And then Richard Tice kind of kept it going for a bit and sort of in a dormant, kind of semi-active, dormant way. And then I joined in March 2023.
Okay. And then now we're at Advance UK.
Yeah.
So tell us a bit from your angle, because we've had speculation, we've seen the news reports. From your point of view, what was the moment from Reform to Advance?
So the differences. So first of all, Reform is Farage, Farage is Reform.
Mm-hmm.
And that was, as a matter of principle, challenging for me. And so when Richard Tice wanted me to join Reform, when he invited me to join Reform, effectively rejoin the Brexit Party, one of the debates we had before I committed to joining was Farage giving up his control of the party because he owned the majority shares in the party. He declined to do that.
Right.
We then had some toing and froing over a form of words and a letter that would give me the comfort that I needed that the party would be run at least on democratic lines if it wasn't actually democratized.
Yeah.
And Farage refused to sign that. And then in the end, much to my, actually I shouldn't say it's not to my regret. I mean, I did what I did, but perhaps I was ill-advised to rely on a letter from Richard Tice, simply signed by Richard Tice, not by Farage, because Farage was the controlling shareholder. And I joined Reform. And the calculation I made was that Farage had decided he didn't want to be in politics anymore, that he just wanted to make money. He'd actually told me that in 2020. He just wanted to make money. And so I thought, fine, if that's all he wants to do, or, Richard and I can run the party. And Richard promised to run it on a consensual basis, etc. But there were other things, not just the lack of democracy in the party, there were other kind of political positions which Farage and I did not share.
Right.
And so, for example, he's quite relaxed about Northern Ireland being taken over by the European Union. I'm not. He's on the record saying he sees the United Ireland as being inevitable. I don't, over my dead body. And a few other things like that. So we've got, if you like, ideological differences. And Richard Tice and I then put the party on the map. Effectively, we took it from 6% in the polls in March 2023 to 16% when the general election was called. Farage could smell. He didn't smell it at the beginning of the general election, actually, because on the first day that the general election was announced, he said he wouldn't stand and that the US elections were more important than the UK elections. Again, much to my annoyance, because we've been working very hard for the general election, and for him to come out and sort of undermine it, saying the US election is more important. And he made our general election press conference all about him, because all we had to answer then was questions on why he wasn't standing. Anyway, that was on the 23rd of May, 2023. 2024, thereabouts. And then 3rd of June, by 3rd of June 2024, he realised that we were going to win seats, something I'd already known for a while because I'd been touring the country.
Yeah.
I could smell the two-party system was kind of broken. And he then he came back as leader without any discussion. And at that point, I knew one of two things had to happen. The party had to be democratized.
Yeah.
And I immediately texted Richard Tice and said, Farage has appointed himself leader. We'll go through the general election. At the end of the general election, we must democratize the party. And no real response. But, I bit my lower lip through the general election, not to want to ruffle feathers. Then I mounted a campaign for the democratization of the party, with which you might be familiar, Dean. I made, wrote lots of articles, was on air all the time saying it needed to be democratized, etc. Farage and Youssef lied about the democratization of the party. They're still lying about the democratization of the party. It's still controlled by Farage and Youssef.
Because he left, didn't he? Or he was sacked?
He resigned in a fit of pique because Sarah Potchin a few months ago said that she had questions about the burqa.
Right.
And that kind of irritated him. Resigned and then was brought back within 24 hours.
Yeah.
Having said he was exhausted or something. Anyway, so then Farage started saying really peculiar things, and the political divide between Farage and me got wider and wider. He said things like he wasn't concerned about the rate of demographic change in the country, that he wasn't in favour of deporting all illegal migrants, that he thought it was politically impossible, that we mustn't politically alienate Islam, that we've got to somehow accommodate Islam, which whatever that means. And he started saying things like we should consider taking Shamima Begum back into the country. He started appointing people in reform who were rabid Remainers, like Charlie Mullins of Pimlico Plumbers. He put him forward as a candidate. And so reform started behaving like the Uniparty and, like just another form of the Conservatives. And it's gone on doing that, Dean, as you can see. But on the 28th of November, I don't know why these dates are in my head, but on the 28th of November 2024, I'd had enough. I listened to all the nonsense coming out of Farage, the lies about the democratization of the party, and so on, as well as his political shifting sands. And I resigned from the party.
Yeah.
I knew that in the absence of having democratized the party, a new political force was needed. Farage is not the man. Elon Musk is 100% right. He saw right through Farage correctly.
Right.
And so I knew a new political force was needed. What I wasn't convinced about was whether there was any appetite for a new political force, because, reform had captured the hopes and aspirations of those of us who wanted to lead the supranational order and bring back democracy to this country, etc. And then he sacked Rupert Lowe in the way that he did.
That's right.
Youssef trumped up charges against Youssef, police complaints, which were later dismissed. Though I knew instantly, and I said at the time, these are all trumped up. And when he did that, I sensed there may be room for a new political party because people are bound to see through Farage.
Yeah.
And I was also getting lots and lots of feedback from grassroots reform members that they were upset with Farage and Youssef. And a lot of them had been sacked. People I'd campaigned with shoulder to shoulder had been sacked, had their reputations tarnished on the way out, etc.
Right.
And so I could sense there was an army building, and the army wanted a new conduit, And so I spoke to Rupert. We decided to launch a new party, of which Rupert was going to be leader, and I was going to be chairman and get the thing on the map. And then Rupert, when his charges were dropped against him, I think reflected on what he wanted to do, decided he didn't want to do party politics.
No.
But by this stage, I kind of G'd up our support base in anticipation of a political party arriving. And I could sense that there was a need for a political party. So we launched Advance UK. And we set ourselves a hurdle just to test whether or not I was right. We set ourselves a hurdle of 30,000 members before we applied to the Electoral Commission for registration as a party. And we hit that 30,000 figure within a couple of months. And
which is really a new party.
It's quite stellar. It's quite stellar. And, it took Reform 5 years to get 30,000 members. Right. And that's why I chose 30,000 members, because that's what we had at the beginning of the general election.
Yeah.
And anyway, so here we are. We've got now just over 35,000 members. We've got 20 odd members of our college, which is the kind of body of people that we've created in advance, who are the intellectual ballast and sort of heart, souls, and mind of our party.
Yeah.
So we have membership, we have the intellectual capacity, and the ability to deliver the policy framework that we need to, in our minds, to save the country. We've applied to the Electoral Commission for registration.
Yeah.
We will now start making policies. We will start identifying candidates and start campaigning at a grassroots level right across the country. We're going to start that straight away. And so that by the time the general election comes, whenever it comes, we're going to be absolutely ready for it.
Okay. So how does Tommy Robinson fit into that?
So Tommy Robinson is a member of the party.
Yeah.
We have a rule in Advance UK that anyone who is a British citizen and on the electoral roll is welcome to join the party.
Okay.
It's not for us to police who joins the party. I think one of the biggest drawbacks in British politics, and it's embedded. We see it in our criminal justice system, but it's also become embedded in British politics, is that we're all judging each other. We're all looking at each other going, well, what did you say 5 years ago? And are you a worthy person to be on public platform? And that's essentially cancel culture. And it's invaded the Conservative Party, it's invaded the Labour Party, it's invaded Reform. Reform use hope not hate. They have used hope not hate in order to vet their candidates. And so I was absolutely clear that we would only we would have members from any British citizen or member, on the electoral roll to join, and that we would not be policing our members.
Mm-hmm.
Of course, our members sign up to our policy agenda when they become members, and if they don't like what we're saying and doing as a party, then they can obviously resign. But they endorse us; we're not endorsing them. And Tommy Robinson has looked at the party; he knows what we stand for, and he buys into it. And I think he also buys in, quite rightly, into this repudiation of cancel culture.
Yeah, I think he's definitely been on the receiving end of that quite a bit.
He has, yeah. And look, he's no saint. I think by his own admission, he'd say he isn't a saint. But the establishment has also targeted him. That imprisonment last year.
I genuinely think, I agree. I think he was put in prison as a political prisoner.
Absolutely.
I actually wrote a lengthy piece on it. It's been on my Substack and got quite a lot of reads. So there's lots of people out there, not just us, who think that he was put in prison for political gains, really.
Yeah.
So how would Advance UK stop the boats?
So stopping the boats is actually quite a straightforward thing to do. Some people argue we would need to leave the European Convention of Human Rights and repeal the Human Rights Act, which is the embodiment of the ECHR in our domestic legislation. Actually, I think we've got all the right to stop the boats anyway. And by stop the boats, I mean physically stop the boats.
Okay, so I'll wave a magic wand. You're now Prime Minister as of tomorrow. What do you do first to stop
Okay,
the boats?
well, if I were Prime Minister, there's a hell of a lot I would do.
First 100 days, go.
First day, let me tell you what I do on the first day. And it will answer your question on the boats as well. On the first day, I would repeal the Equalities Act.
Right.
I would repeal the Human Rights Act. I would withdraw ourselves from the European Convention of Human Rights. At this stage, by the way, we've got full-on disagreement with the European Union. The United Kingdom at this point is outside the supranational order because the EU wants the UK to stay part of the ECHR.
Yeah.
I would also repudiate the Northern Ireland Protocol in the withdrawal agreement, and I would take Northern Ireland firmly back into the United Kingdom. There would be no customs border on the island of Ireland.
Right.
If the EU wishes to put one there, they can, but we would take Northern Ireland back into the Union with Great Britain. As you may know, Dean, that the Northern Ireland Protocol has put a border between Great Britain and Northern Ireland. So those are some of the legislative changes I would do. I'm coming round to your question. I would also suspend immediately the granting of indefinite leave to remain, and I would revoke the rights of anyone granted indefinite leave to remain from the moment that the Labour government took office.
Right.
I would cancel all asylum granted from the moment that the Labour government came into office.
Okay.
Anyone in this country here without a visa and without a visa, effectively would therefore be those granted indefinite leave to remain before the Labour Party would not have their positions cancelled. But anyone from the 24th of July 2024 would effectively be here without permission. And being here without permission, you would be an illegal migrant.
Yeah.
And so if you did not leave voluntarily, you would then be detained and then deported, including all the illegal migrants who've crossed the channel in order to get here. All foreigners would have their benefits withdrawn on the first day of our government. And we would direct the British Navy to develop a force which intercepted dinghies in the channel, using whatever technology was required, sensors, drones, barricades, fast-moving boats, specially trained individuals to do this job, and intercept those boats and turn them around and make sure they go back to France. And if they refuse to turn around, nevertheless refuse them entry into British territorial waters. And I think a combination of all those things would pretty much stop the boats coming instantly.
It does sound like a lot. From people I've spoken to who aren't in politics, like the people on the ground, the normal day-to-day voters, that sounds like a lot of the things that they want to see happen. Why do you think the Uni Party reform not going to implement things like that?
So Farage, I think, has trouble with the word mass deportation. And the reason I think he has trouble with it is because he doesn't think the British electorate would support. Farage is the ultimate political expedient. He's a fantastic campaigner. And he doesn't really have a political philosophy. What he wants to do is anything that's required to be said and done in order to get into office.
Right.
That's what you need to know about Farage to understand why he does what he does. And he thought, I think he's changing his thinking now, but he thought that the use of the word mass deportation of illegal migrants was something the British electorate would not countenance. They see that as some kind of draconian step, brutal step, which is one step too far. Of course, what you've got to remember when you're deporting people is all you're doing is sending them home.
Of course.
It's not like you're sending them to internment or a concentration camp or anything. You're just sending them home. But he's now coming round to the fact that mass deportations is something that the British people want, though he seems still incapable of finding a policy that delivers it. You know, they came out with a mass deportation policy a couple of weeks ago, and then the next morning he held it below the waterline by excluding women and children.
Yeah.
Which makes it unfunctioning. But the reason the Conservative Party and the Labour Party won't do any of this is because they absolutely have bought into the supranational order. They're internationalists. They believe that the betterment of this country is served through global prosperity, that they don't really see their job as governing the United Kingdom for the benefits of the UK and its people.
No.
They see governing globally in cooperation with their friends and partners, as they keep calling them, in Europe, Canada, Australia, the US, and so on, as the method of government of Western civilization. That's how they see it. And they are fundamentally wrong. Of course, we should cooperate on the global stage, but we must do so as an independent nation, putting forward our own national interests first. And rather like we did in the olden days, cooperated, but we did it with British national interests first.
So it's almost like a British version of MAGA. We're going to put ourselves forward, but we will cooperate. Am I understanding that correctly?
Of course, we'll cooperate, but it has to be with British national interests being uncompromised. And what's happened is, the evolution of politics, I think, in Western civilization starts at a very good place. It starts in post-World War II, where, the belligerent nations that had all gone to war recognized that there had to be global cooperation for there to be a chance of peace. So things like the United Nations were set up, and the seeds of the EU were sown, in the post-World War II order, including the European Convention of Human Rights, which I think came into force, or the court came into force in 1959. And these international bodies were set up to make sure that there was cooperation at an international level. And I think all of it was born out of good motive. But over the 50, 60, 70 years since then, what's happened is that those entities have become increasingly more powerful, increasingly more assertive of their own roles. And we as member states of those organizations have ceased to be able to influence them to the extent that we needed to in order to protect our own interests. and we have now lost sight of what it means to be the United Kingdom. Which is why we find it impossible to enforce our border. It's just imposing our border between France and the United Kingdom has become a challenge for our political class.
Yeah.
Our forefathers would have had no trouble in stopping the dinghies. They would have given the dinghies warning to turn around, and if they didn't turn around, they would have taken action.
Yeah, of course.
And but we've lost the political will, and that comes out of this global order, and we've got to reverse that.
Okay. So speaking of the global order's influence on the United Kingdom, how would you define in 2025? How would you define the term British values? What is a British value?
British value is the sum total of your heritage and what you've learnt about your heritage coming through time, through your parents, through your education, through what you've read about the United Kingdom's history. Our culture and our existence today and how we see ourselves as being British is a function of everything we've learned about who we are, together also with the culture that's formed as a result of our regulatory and legislative framework. Every time a law is changed, our culture changes. And I don't know how old you are, Dean, but you've got a few grey hairs. So I'm
39.
39. Okay. You've got a few more grey hairs than I would have expected at 39.
That's what 3 kids and 2 cats does.
I was pretty much entirely grey by the time I was 40. But I'm 60. When I went to school, the way I was taught British history was that, and I believe it to be correct, by the way, was that we were the British Empire didn't come about by design. It came about by accident because actually we were very good traders. Mm-hmm. Wherever we went, we did well for the local population. The East India Company wasn't a military force. It was a commercial force.
That's right.
Of course, it had its own military capability, but it was a commercial force. And with a combination of our great trading nature, our common law, which facilitated trade, our advancement through technology, and our preparedness to engage with people across the globe, the British Empire emerged. And it therefore emerged essentially because we were bloody good at what we did. And nowadays, what we're taught, and so therefore we were taught to be proud of the British Empire. Yeah. And we were taught that we were the good guys in World War II, and so on. Now, our children are taught that their wealth comes from the slave trade, that was our empire was built on.
They conveniently leave out that we helped end the slave trade. Yeah. I was born in Hull, in Yorkshire, which is where William Wilberforce was born,
right?
And he was one of the proponents to destroy slave trade.
Absolutely, evangelical Christian, born out of our constitutional Christian and cultural roots, that the slave trade was shut down.
Mm-hmm.
Yet Christianity and our constitutional Christian roots are attacked. Yet we are told that our forefathers are slave traders. I went to a sixth form in Wellingborough where I was standing, when I was standing in the election, and I asked the sixth formers, they were a political class doing politics, and I asked them, where did our wealth as a nation come from? And instead of them saying the agrarian revolution or the industrial revolution or trading internationally, 2/3 of the hands went up for the slave trade. And so what it means to be British has been hijacked in the pursuit, I think, Dean, also of this global order, because if you want a global order, you don't want people to be nationally proud. That pride and that national identity stands in opposition to a global order.
Of course.
And it's also no accident that we now see our flags being challenged by the political class. Those of us who are proud of St. George's flag or the Union flag, we're told that we're racists. We're not racists. We just like our flag. We love our flag because it represents everything we believe in. Yeah. That's what it is. And so the question you've asked is an interesting question, because the question itself is a question which should never be asked. What does it mean to be British? We all should know what it means to be British. But we've had our traditions, our history, our constitution traduced by this international order. And we're now grasping around, trying to understand, well, who are we? What are we? And we're reduced to banalities like, well, we're nice people, we're welcoming people, which is just, it doesn't mean anything.
So speaking of being welcoming and nice, where do you stand on this re-implementation of the idea of digital ID and the erosion of our freedoms?
So digital ID is a really interesting one. I'll answer the
Because it
question.
was Blair first, wasn't it?
Yeah.
And now it's Starmer, and I can't understand how it would stop immigration.
Well, isn't it peculiar, Dean, that they fail to police our borders? They fail to keep the criminal justice system under control in the United Kingdom. Criminality is completely out of control in the UK.
Mm-hmm.
And they wish to reward their failures with greater control of us. It's like saying, we failed you, we haven't delivered for the country, and so we want you to give up even more of your civil liberties and trust us more to actually get it right. I wouldn't trust them with digital ID, not in a million years. And it's an erosion of our civil liberties. We've seen a progressive erosion of our civil liberties, at the heart of which, of course, is the erosion of our freedom of speech.
Yeah, absolutely.
And this would be an erosion of our ability to actually go about our daily business without the government knowing what the hell it is we're up to. They're already seeking to take control of cash. They've effectively shut down cash, the use of cash in the United Kingdom.
It's minimal now.
Yeah, they want to introduce central bank government digital currency.
That's right. Yeah.
And CBDCs. And all of this is the tentacles of the state coming into our private lives and reducing us to mere tokens of the functionaries in the state's cogs in the state's wheel. That's what they wish us to be. So the notion of us being individuals, our civil liberties, our right to go out about our normal business, to make money, to keep that money, to spend that money the way we wish to spend it, to air our views the way we wish them to be aired, to make the case for how we think we should be governed. All of that is being set aside. And it's therefore, in my mind, ironic that they regard those of us who believe in our country, democracy, freedom of speech, etc., as far-right fascists, when actually the policies being practiced by Starmer are the ones that have all the hallmarks of fascism.
Mm-hmm. Government overreach, authoritarianism.
Absolutely.
So I saw on a podcast recently, you were asked about the declining birth rate.
Yeah.
Now, people who watch my channel may not have seen that. So can you tell us about Bonk for Britain?
So Bonk for Britain, I mean, it just came to me. I think it's.
I thought it was fantastic. That is a tagline.
Yeah, it's a tagline, and bonking is a fun activity, so we should all be doing it as much as possible for the country. But again, Farage has got this wrong. He was originally against removing the cap on two-child benefits, and I completely agree that cap should not be removed. In fact, I don't think you should get benefits for having children. Having children is something that is optional. It has to be done with responsibility, not just taking responsibility for their financial welfare, but also their emotional, cultural, and all the other aspects of bringing up children. And therefore, what we need in this country is a coherent set of policies which encourage people to have families, but without doing it through the benefit system. The problem with doing it through the benefit system, which is the child benefit thing, is that you're encouraging those people who are least prepared and able to have families. And what you want to do is get those who are capable and responsible people who are contributing citizens to have families. And the way you do that, in my mind, is through the tax system. So you reward people for getting married, you reduce their taxes for getting married, you reduce their taxes again if they have children, and you reduce their taxes if one of them wishes to stay at home. And of course, that all takes burden off the state, because at the moment, what we've got is both parents working, not able to afford to have children. To the extent that they have children, they then put those children into state care at a very young age. But if you create the ability for either a mother or a father, in my mind, preferably a mother, because I think they're much better at looking after young children than men are, in my own experience.
Yeah.
People might say that that's a prejudiced view, but my wife was a much better parent than I was when they were little. Fathers come into their own, I think, when children get slightly bigger. But anyway, with young children, one parent should be at home, and they should be rewarded for staying at home. So the husband, if he's working, or the wife, if she's working, should get a bigger tax break because one spouse is at home.
I think they do that in one of the Nordic countries as well.
Do they?
Something similar I've read. I can't tell you where it is, but one of the countries is for every child, 25% of your income tax is removed.
Yeah.
So if you have 4 children, you don't pay income tax.
So it's a much better way to do it, isn't it? And then round the family, instead of worrying about children going online and therefore the government having to introduce Online Safety Act, for example, you've actually got a parent full-time at home bringing up the children and making sure that they're not on their iPhones, not on their iPad, not doing stuff that they shouldn't be doing. And you return power to the family. And if you return power to the family, first of all, you get children brought up in a much better way. We all know that parents are the best people to bring up their children. Yeah. And so you get children who are emotionally balanced and grow up without mental health issues and so on. And you also, round that family unit, then you build your society. Lots of families build your society. They all identify as a family. The nuclear family identifies as a family. The society identifies as a society. And the nation state, therefore, identifies as a nation state. Those are your building blocks. And so Bonk for Britain actually needs to be a policy of any party that cares about the national interest.
I think I did my part. I've got 3. So
yeah, I've got 3 too. I've done my part. Only just.
Only just.
You need more than 2.5 or something, don't you?
That's right.
Yeah, to replace and grow the population.
So moving on from the family element, because obviously there is a cost of living crisis at the minute, which has been going on for quite a while. How would Advance tackle that?
So the cost of living crisis is a function of lots of different things going wrong. It's partly down to immigration, because cheap immigration, unskilled cheap immigration, is basically undermining wages, so wages don't rise. Mm-hmm. It's also a function of an overly generous welfare state and overly burdensome tax system. So people are effectively being incentivized not to work because they can't make much money working, but they can get quite a lot of money from welfare.
Yeah.
And there's not enough of a gap, so what we need to do is to cut back immigration, reduce the demand, remove the undercutting of British wages, and also remove the demand on all our public services, our housing, our school, etc., that mass immigration creates. Reduce welfare so that there's an incentive to go to work, and reduce taxes on those going to work so that when they go to work, the pound that they earn is largely left in their pocket, not taken by the state. And you can balance the books that way, because if you're cutting welfare, you can afford to cut taxes. And if wages are going up because you're not importing cheap labour, then actually the exchequer gets more money because wages are going up. So it can tax those who are working. Those who are working pay, actually in absolute terms, more tax.
Yeah.
They're keeping a larger proportion of what they earn, but they're earning a lot more.
No, that makes sense.
And then, of course, the other thing we've got to do, which is critical, is ditch net zero so that we all have cheaper energy. We've got to reduce the cost base of this country. Mm-hmm. There's the income side, if you like, of the formula, which is reducing immigration, reducing taxes, cutting welfare. But then there's the cost side of this formula as well. We live in a very costly society. It's partly down to net zero.
Yeah.
Turning our back on cheap fossil fuels, having extremely expensive energy. But also we have a very highly regulated market. And the way to supercharge the British economy is to deregulate, which doesn't cost the exchequer anything.
No.
Cut back. Paradoxically, cutting back on employment restrictions actually strengthens employment, because employers feel more able to employ because they don't feel they're being hamstrung every time they take an employee on. And the more laws that they put in place ostensibly for the protection of employees, the more damage they do to the employment market.
Yeah.
And so we would need to reduce employment restrictions. We would need to reduce restrictions on owning and renting houses. We need to cut all the tax back in trading of assets and so on. And if you do all of that, actually you then get an economic resurgence in the United Kingdom, and the cost of living crisis disappears. We all become actually quite well off.
No, that's interesting. Actually, I never thought of it like that. Quite interesting. You just said about like employment laws and things like that, and it just made me think. What do you feel about this so-called alleged, just for the tip, two-tier justice system?
Well, it's absolutely abhorrent. So,
do you think it exists?
100%.
Yeah.
It's a regulatory requirement. So under the Equalities Act, which is anything but creating an equal society. Effectively, the groundwork was laid for what we now call progressive discrimination, which means that those who are from a minority ethnicity or minority religious belief, minority sexual preference, transgender, and so on, they have the regulatory and legal framework of this country discriminating in their favor, and which is done in businesses, in institutions, etc., through the policy of diversity, equity, and inclusion, DEI, and and the police are taught exactly the same thing, that they need to protect and promote those who come from those backgrounds. So you'll see very light touch policing of the pro-Palestinian marches and draconian policing of any what they regard as far-right nationalist marches, including, I think the great disappointment for the criminal justice system and the mainstream commentariat from the 13th of September was just how peaceful that rally was. There were 25 arrests, 9 of which were attributable to the hundreds of thousands of people who turned up to the rally, and 16 of which were attributable to the anti-rally, the self-proclaimed anti-racist who turned up.
I saw the statistics when you compared the arrests at the United Kingdom rally compared to, is it Notting Hill Carnival?
Yeah,
it's huge.
And they talk about Notting Hill Carnival in glowing terms.
Yeah, exactly.
As if it's some paragon of virtue. And so we absolutely have a two-tier criminal justice system. And the Sentencing Council, which is the council that advises the courts on the length of prison sentences and so on that people should have, actually is on the record advising for ethnic minorities and those coming from a socially disadvantaged background having lighter sentences. Now, that is the antithesis of equality under the law. That's basically saying, if you've broken the law and you come and you're from an ethnic minority, you'll get a lesser punishment than if you're not an ethnic minority. That is not equality under the law. So we clearly have a two-tier. I mean, I'd say it's multi-tiered. It's not two-tiered. There's like some people. It depends on who you are and the circumstances in which you were arrested and what you did, and you'll get your law dispensed to you in the prejudiced way. Completely prejudiced. And you would have heard me say this, perhaps, Dean. There's a reason why Lady Justice is blindfolded above the Old Bailey, because justice is a dish that needs to be served cold.
Absolutely.
There should be no emotion in the dispensing of justice. It should merely look at the facts of the case. It should determine whether or not a wrong was committed under the law.
Yeah.
And if a wrong was committed under the law, then the appropriate sentence should be passed. And it doesn't matter whether you're white, brown, black, whatever. And you should just get the sentence you deserve. And to turn that on its head is to undermine the criminal justice system, which is effectively what we've done.
Yeah. So speaking about the pro-Palestine marches, question that's just sprung to mind, what's your opinion of what Starmer's done recently of recognising Palestine?
I think you guys are lunatic. I mean, you do not at any level. First of all, there is no entity. There is no physical entity that you could point to and say, well, that is a state capable of functioning as a state. It's a nonsense. There isn't a Palestine at the moment. Number one. Number two, what he's trying to do is, in recognizing Palestine, give the moral high ground to the Palestinians, who at the moment are represented politically by Hamas. So he is effectively granting the political moral high ground to a terrorist organization.
I do wonder now if Palestine Action is still a prescribed terrorist group.
I think it is still a prescribed terrorist group.
Which is an oxymoron in my mind.
It is an oxymoron, yeah. But look, no one wants killing in Gaza. No one wants to see images of babies having their legs blown off. And all of that is awful. But you do not correct that by blessing Hamas. Hamas need to be taken out. They need to be taken out. Anyone who thinks that Hamas, there's been enough bombing, Hamas should now be somehow brought back into the fold, absolutely not. They're terrorists. Every single member of Hamas should be either incarcerated or killed. That's it.
Okay. No, I appreciate you've given me quite a bit of your time today, and I do appreciate it. So I've got one, maybe two last questions. No, I'll merge them into one. So your ultimate vision for the UK under Advanced UK's leadership over a 5-year period, if you were to get in tomorrow, in a perfect world, for example, what would that 5-year plan look like? What is that perfect vision for you?
Everything we're going to do, Dean, we'll do pretty much on the first day. Advance UK is a very serious political party. We are going to call out the establishment. Relentlessly, we're going to call out the establishment. But most populist parties stop there. They just call out the establishment and they've got no vision of what comes next. We've got a very clear understanding of what we want, which is the nation state of Great Britain and Northern Ireland, recognizing and reinforcing our Christian constitutional roots, standing for freedom, which is a smaller state, freedom of speech, and standing against the indoctrination of our children, removing the supranational order from our democracy and making sure that our elected representatives actually represent us and are held accountable by us, and getting rid of all the bureaucracy in this country that prohibits that from happening. And then fourthly, equality under the law. And we are going to start making policies which deliver those four mission aims, if you like. We're going to start making those policies now. I'm already in discussions with the members of our college to get that policy framework in place. And every policy will hang together with every other policy, right, so that it's delivered in a coherent, holistic way. And, we don't go down cul-de-sacs and rabbit holes. And by the time we get to the general election, we will not just have all the policies ready, we will have the draft legislation ready to enact those policies. And when we go to the public to get their vote in 2028, 2029, whenever the election comes, we will not just have a manifesto of policies, we are going to have an addendum of draft legislation behind it. And therefore, the House of Lords, when we win our majority and we present our legislation to the House of Lords, they cannot resist it because it would have been part of our manifesto.
Right.
We are going to have a shock and awe approach to legislating when we get into government. We will reverse all the ills that were started by Tony Blair and then magnified so many more times by successive administrations. We're going to get rid of all of that. We're going to return this country to being a proud, independent, prosperous United Kingdom of Great Britain and Northern Ireland. And anyone who doesn't like it, watch out, we're coming.
Benyamin, thank you.